Hello, Boris. You all right?
Hi, James. Yeah, I'm all right. Yourself?
Yeah, no, good. I heard your flight was a bit of a nightmare.
Little delay, and then Monday afternoon coming from Heathrow. It takes you a little bit. So
Okay, well,
yeah,
we got here in the end.
yeah.
I won't keep you waiting. I won't prattle on too much. We've got 30 minutes.
Okay.
So this piece for the Observer, a lot of it is about things that you've learned in your life. So normally, how I do these things is to just ask some quite disconnected questions and then fashion some wisdom out of that. So I guess a good place to start is, what's the first thing in your life you remember?
The first thing in my life that I remember, wow, going back to my hometown of Leimen, back in the day in West Germany. And I remember being with my parents. I think I'm just trying to put myself back. My parents and my sister. I would say that I remember first.
How old do you think you were?
Three or four.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you close with your family?
I'm, my father passed 20 years ago, but with my mother, my sister, yeah, we're very close. Yeah.
Okay. I was reading about how, I mean, obviously you were like a bit of a tennis prodigy, but it wasn't expected that you would play tennis professionally. Is that right?
No, I mean, I was pretty good in a number of different sports. Tennis was one of them, but I was good in football, good in swimming, good in skiing. So I was allowed to do a number of different sports growing up, and it wasn't early on that it was clear that I become a tennis player. Also, we must remember the times. We're talking, this is, the 70s. And ultimately, I became a professional in 1984. There weren't many tennis professionals in Germany, and tennis as such was not not that much of a popular sport, and let's say as other sports.
So when did it become clear that you were more talented at that sport than the other sports?
Well, I was with the age of 14. I'd say the age of 12, I was the best in the country. And with 14, I was the men's indoor German champion already at 14. So that it became clear that I'm better than just a good junior.
So what does that feel like when you realize? Because you must at that age think, "Blimey, I'm quite special." What's that like for your ego or the way that you view yourself?
No. I've never been the type that is thinks that I'm better than anybody else or that I'm more special than anybody else. I mean, I loved winning, but I never, I was raised a different way. That didn't mean I was, a special guy. No.
I sort of used the wrong words there because it implied an arrogance, and that's not what I was doing. But I guess that when you're turning out to play tennis and you're playing against men, that must make you think, oh, my life is very different to other boys my age.
I wouldn't say different. I was in school, I was in a gymnasium in Germany, and I was playing every afternoon, but I was also playing other sports. So it wasn't just that I was playing hours of tennis and that's it. So I was always into 2 or 3 other sports, and just I think it was a natural instinct, a natural gift that I had, that I didn't need. I was always quite big, physically, even as a teenager. So it wasn't that much of a stretch for me to play with men, even though I was only 14 or 15 years old.
Right. Okay. Do you ever feel like, because you had success with the sport so early, do you ever feel like you missed out on a bit of a regular youth?
No, I mean, that's the image that. Sorry, close the door here. Sorry, 1 second.
Yeah. Okay.
No, that there's an image transcended nowadays that when you're a child prodigy, that you are just all day long on tennis courts and are protected by your parents. It wasn't like this in the mid 80s. First of all, we had no social media. There was no phones. My parents always trusted my sister and myself, being sensible. So, if there was a weekend and I wanted to go out with my friends, 16 or so, 15, I did that. It wasn't a curfew and I have to be going to sleep at 9 o'clock. I wasn't raised that way. No.
You make it sound very easy.
It was easy. I mean, there was no pressure. There was not. I mean, the last thing on my parents' mind was that I became a tennis professional. It was like it was the opposite. They wanted me to finish studies. You go to university to become a doctor or a lawyer. So the tennis professional was not on the card. That wasn't the goal.
It's interesting though, because you have had such success as a coach as well.
Yeah.
How do you apply the advice that I imagine is integral to being a good coach with the fact that this was very natural for you?
Well, I think you said it. I mean, it's tennis is very natural for me as a player, or as a coach, or as a commentator. I see it well. I can read the game. I see what's happening 10 minutes later. And I think when you're a teenager, that becomes part of your game. You know where the ball is going, right? So that's why it was easy for me to pick it up. Also, I was surrounded by great coaches. We had a great coach from the federation. And then I met already Mr. Jančirik. I was 15 years old. So I already was training with the likes of Guillermo Vilas and Henri Leconte and Panatta and all of them when I was 15, 16. So, these guys also formed me.
Was there ever a moment though, because it did come naturally to you, was there ever a moment where you didn't think it was going to work out, or did you always see success coming?
I mean, there were stretches when I broke my ankle in 1984. That was actually my first professional tournament. I played the qualifying in Roehampton and to qualify. And then I made it through the third round. And I broke my ankle playing against Bill Scanlon, who just passed away a week ago or so. And to come back from that as your first pro tournament, and obviously, my mother, I had a call with her, and she said, "I told you so. You should have stayed in school, son. Don't become a tennis professional." That's when you start to question yourself. Those next 3 or 4 months, for the rehab, and then you start, playing not as good because you're not as mobile. But that was the only stretch, let's say, from the summer of '84 to November, when I made my breakthrough in Melbourne at the time. I reached the quarterfinal. And I wasn't 17 yet. I think that was the only time that I wondered whether I can make it.
During that time, were you thinking of alternative careers?
Oh no, I was glad to be gone from home. I mean, imagine you're 16 years old, you're surrounded by adults, you make a little bit of money, and then you're on your own. I mean, I always felt that was great.
Okay, cool. You were saying before a little bit about the perception of child prodigies, and you were dispelling that. You were dispelling that myth a little bit. A lot by the British press, obviously,
yeah.
The press I've grown up with, like they portrayed you in a particular way, lots of nicknames and things like that.
Yeah.
Why do you think that was?
Look, I think Germany and England, we sort of have a love-hate relationship, right? And there comes this very German-looking guy playing powerful tennis, and I think before they got to know me a little bit, my personality, and the fact that I call London home now for a long time. You have these images that you want to portray on one another. I mean, we have it in football now. Or you have it when somebody English plays well, it the German media is very similar, right? Before you meet the person, you put him in a box a little bit and think that he's like all the other Germans we don't like, or he's all like all the other English we don't like, until you get to know the person. I think that's why those nicknames were early on when I started winning at Wimbledon.
Do you think it ever verged on xenophobia?
I don't know. At the time, I obviously didn't understand. Again, the media, they do what they can to sell their newspapers and their stories, whatever way they can. So it's not up for me to make a judgment of that. I think very soon, once the English got to know me, they were a lot kinder to me than before.
But did it ever hurt you?
I mean, I was 17, so you question yourself, when I was winning, it was no blitzkrieg, right? I was no panzer, I was a young man playing tennis. So why would you combine those titles with me? I was just a tennis player, I wasn't a soldier.
No, absolutely. You've always seemed to me as someone who is definitely portrays an image of being very mentally strong.
Yeah.
Would you say that was fair?
I think so, yeah.
Do you think that those qualities helped you with poker?
I think they helped me with life. Whatever, all the ups and downs, I go through. I think my mental consistency helps me go through the ups and the lows. You have to be mentally strong also when you win a lot, and that you don't lift off the ground. So I think that always gave me a stability, a sort of a balance where I'm never too satisfied and too happy, or I'm never too desperate either way. I'd like to always keep a middle ground.
What the question is, I guess, what do you put that down to?
Upbringing. My mother was a tough cookie. Surviving the war, coming from the Czech Republic at the time, to a camp in Germany. I think a lot of her DNA is in my DNA. I think my father was a very tough man, hardworking. Kept his family together. So I think that upbringing helped me a lot.
How aware of your mother and your father's past? You mentioned the war. How aware of that was you when you were growing up? Was it talked about in the house?
I wasn't aware so much, when you're a teenager. But the older I got, the more I had the questions, and the older I get, the more mature I got, and the better I understood what they all went through. Yeah. So my parents are both born in 1935. So when so they were 10 when the war ended, and obviously then the first couple of years living in Germany was very difficult to survive, and I think that made them stronger, and I think ultimately that made my sister and myself stronger because of that.
No, that's really interesting. When you have coached, I guess what I would really like to know is what's the foundations of your coaching? What's the thing you try to instill in the people you're coaching?
Well, two things. First of all, tennis is a very logical sport, right? You don't win by luck or by surprise. If you follow the rules, and if you're physically, fit enough, you're going to win more than you lose. Hence, that's why the top players win a lot more, because they play a little bit smarter than the rest.
Okay.
And secondly, tennis is one of the ultimate sports where it's 1-to-1, so you only have to defeat the other guy. And there are ways to do it. There are ways to control your emotions. There are ways to not give up the fight until the last point is played. I mean, you watched the Djokovic-Tsitsipas match yesterday, maybe. So, I mean, I think Novak can write a book about that, and so can Rafa and Roger. I think you really have to play until the very end, and you just have to play the other guy. You don't have to play anybody else, and I think that's what a lot of tennis players forget.
So I'm a big Andy Murray fan.
Yeah.
But the British Isles hasn't been particularly successful in producing great tennis talent.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Long, good question, and it's an answer that I could give you for 30 minutes, but then interview would be over. A lot has look at Andy's attitude. Andy is one of the ultimate fighters out there, right? He's not the most talented, he's not the strongest, but he's got a heart of a lion, and I think that takes you very far. If you got the dedication, his mother knows a lot about the sport. He's got a talented brother, so he has a nice package of understanding the game better, plus with his attitude. So you can question yourself. Maybe some of the other juniors don't have that attitude.
Because, okay, right.
Because a lot of coaches, and I was the head of German tennis for many years now, and a lot of coaches pick their players because they have a nice forehand at 14 or 16. I would never pick a nice forehand. I would always pick the guy with the right attitude. A forehand you can learn, an attitude you cannot learn.
That's an amazing answer.
Yeah.
When you were in your prime, you were always a very exciting player to watch, I have to say, because you were tempestuous. There was a lot of flair, a lot of character. Do you ever look back and wish that you hadn't lost your temper sometimes?
Part of it, I think I've played with my emotions. They make me stronger, they make me better, but sometimes they got the better of me, of course. But if you weigh it in 100%, I think I've won more because of it than I lost because of it.
Okay, yeah, no, that's cool. What about when you first saw Djokovic play? What was your first impressions?
I always thought he had an incredible attitude, a bit like a street fighter. I always also got to know the person. The person is very different than the player you see on the court. As a player, he seems very mechanical, very cold. He's the opposite in private life. He's the most warmth, endearing character you can find. So I was always intrigued that how can these two personalities be in one person? And our friendship goes way back, and I liked his group of people around him. So I think there was always a sentiment of respect and admiration for each other, and I think that's why we clicked as a coach player. Well,
there's been some conversation recently about players' mental health and the press schedule. Did you have any thoughts on that?
It's to be discussed about. Obviously, Naomi Osaka pulling off the French Open because of bouts of depression ever since she won her first Grand Slam is very worrying, and I think the struggle is real. So we as a tennis community, we have to make sure that we don't put young players under so much pressure. Now that's easier said than done, because with winnings there comes expectations, and then with winnings there comes responsibilities you have for your sponsors and for your country and so forth. So it's very difficult to divide everything, but I think the surroundings are very important for young players, and it should always be at the forefront the well-being of a young player. And then yes, it's important to win, but it's more important to feel good about yourself.
Again, that's a brilliant answer. Do you feel like tennis is in some ways stuck in the past, or do you think that it's good at evolving with where society is?
A little bit of both. Tennis is a very conservative sport. Look at the four majors and how they're run, and look at on the men's side in particular. Look at the three guys that have been dominating the game, including Andy Murray, let's say four, for a long time, and because of that, it's a little bit stuck in the past. So it's up to the younger players, the Tsitsipas, the Zverevs, the Medvedevs, to change that a little bit. So I think we have a little bit of both. On the women's side, I'd like to see more consistency on the same group of players winning. For me, it's too much. Somebody new comes around and wins a major. I think that's not good for sport as well, and to establish a certain fan base as well. So I think we have a combination.
I'll leave you with this as a last question. How are Germany going to do in the Euros?
We have the toughest group, my friend, and if we survive Portugal and France, I don't know how we're going to do that. Then we are a good tournament a team. But having watched the English yesterday, you look awfully well too.
I mean, you know we're going to end up playing each other, right?
I don't know. I think it's more a statement about Germany coming out of the group, because I think England is one of the favorites at the moment. So we just gotta find 11 players and somehow beat the Portuguese or the French team to survive, and then we have the conversation in about 3 weeks' time.
Thanks so much for your time, Boris. That's been
Pleasure.
brilliant. Thank you, man.
You.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.